Hello and welcome to Pflaum Gospel Weekly's Unit 4 Overview for Venture. Thank you for joining us. I'm David DeZina, publisher at Pflaum. For those of you returning, welcome back. Those of you who are new, we're pleased you're joining us for this informal review of the unit. If you have any questions or suggestions about Venture or any other level of the weeklies, please email us at editor@pflaum.com. And we ask that during this webinar, you refer to your lessons, the teaching guide, important to have the teaching guide, what the church believes and teaches handbook that the students have, and a copy of the activity book if you have this already. And this can be ordered on pflaum.com or through your customer service representative. Since this webinar is being recorded, you can skip to the lesson that you're about to teach. You can watch the webinar in its entirety to go over the whole unit. And we also ask that you share this recording with other catechists or teachers and even parents, especially parents teaching lessons at home. Nicole, editor of Venture, will now present the overview, followed by an overview of the bilingual edition by Erica. But first, let us pray. Thank you, Jesus, for sharing your gifts. Help me to share these gifts with others. Amen. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, and Nicole, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, David. We are going to start with the third Sunday of Lent. This is our first lesson in Unit 4, and we run through with this unit through the 10th of May, which is 5th Easter. Before I start going through the lessons, I just want to touch base on a couple of things. First of all, just to point out the material section in the teaching guide. In each lesson, the editors list the basic items you'll need for your class, like pens and pencils, any art supplies, game pieces, and also note that you need to have the What the Church Believes and Teaches Catechism Handbook and items for your prayer space. Another note, you'll often need Bibles for lookup activities, and if student Bibles are limited in your school or parish, you may choose to assign any Bible assignments to 2 or 3 children to look up the citations together. In this unit, I want to make note, and as we go through the lessons, I will make note of this, but in this particular unit, there are a number of booklets and other cutting or cut apart activities. And I'm going to recommend that you prep a sample ahead of time. It just, for the kids who work ahead, it can reduce just some questions and anxiety that kids may have. And they can teach each other how to put together a booklet or a cut apart project. I want to move on then to your prayer space and your prayer rituals in class. It's especially important in this unit, both for establishing classroom routine, if you haven't already, as well as to make sure that you have regular prayer in class. Every lesson has an opening and a closing prayer noted in the teaching guide, or you can also offer one of your own. But Venture students can really begin to take a more active role in setting up your prayer space, as well as offering their own prayer intentions. And prayer is the backbone of every Pflaum lesson, but even more so during Lent, as we're encouraging children to pay special attention to the regularity of their prayer practices. And we can model this behavior by not rushing the opening or closing prayer service, nor the prayer ritual before proclaiming the gospel. So I'd really encourage you, even if kids are trickling into your class in the beginning, or if they're watching the clock, or parents are standing in the hallway waiting for their students, just really to encourage you to take the time for prayer at the beginning and the end of your lesson. As I noted before, this is the last unit of the 2019-2020 catechetical year, and our lessons go through May 10th, 5th Easter. But take note now of the last day in your program, and if your class meets beyond May 10th, you can take advantage of 2 different options for additional lessons available through Pflaum. First, there are the free online lessons. They're topic-based and scripturally based, but they're not tied to a particular Sunday gospel. You may choose from this spring a lesson on creation, one on the Ascension, another on Pentecost. Excuse me, I think I noted that there were 3. There are actually 4. And the 4th one is about parables. And they're available online at gospelweeklies.com/venture. There are also, your second option there are 3 reproducible late close lessons available in the Venture Activity Book, which is available for purchase at Pflaum.com. These lessons include The Greatness of Saints, Devotion to Mary, and The Descent of the Holy Spirit. So again, before we begin, gather your Unit 4 teaching guide, your 8 lessons, which begin with March 15th, 2020, and your copy of the What the Church Believes and Teaches Catechism Handbook. And through my description of the lessons, I may refer very quickly to the WCBT, and that's what I mean, the What the Church Believes and Teaches Catechism Handbook. So let's start with the 25th lesson this year, March 15th, the 3rd Sunday of Lent. The cover activity on this is Jesus calls us to stand up, the headline, Who Speaks Up? This concept was covered during Ordinary Time last fall, but we revisit it in the context of Jesus' ministry. Point out to the students that each of the people featured on the cover stands up for different things or groups, but all of them are important. Give the students time to consider what is most important to them and how they might advocate for it, be it support for veterans, the environment, the poor, immigrants and refugees, and of course for speaking up for one's faith. The theme of this lesson is that Jesus gathers his family through baptism. If we flip to the article on pages 2-3, this is a story about Kat Bessette, who serves through the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. What I like about this article is that it traces how Kat began her commitment to serving others when she was just 4 years old. And just to point out, children may be intimidated by the success or commitment of an outstanding peer, and it's good to show that we can begin with small but important efforts. If we flip to page 4, this gospel reading for Sunday is the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. I want to make note here that several of the gospel readings in this particular unit are longer than usual, and this is a good example. You may wish to have the children presented in dramatic form, actually acting it out, rather than a more simple table read. If you opt to do, as we typically do in Pflaum lessons, where you assign parts to volunteers and do a table read, just make sure you have some stretching activities or just little breaks, not during the gospel, but before and after. If you look at the Connecting Gospel and Doctrine, in this lesson, actually, you'll just need to flip back to page 3. Typically, it's on page 4. But again, because this is a longer than normal gospel, we needed to place it on page 3. So the idea of the Connecting Gospel and Doctrine this week is that our faith and our baptismal call are not passive. We are called to share the good news of Jesus as the Samaritan woman did and as Kat Bessette in the article this week did. So if we flip back to page 4, the WCBT connection, or that Catechism Handbook connection, the woman at the well finds out more about Jesus by actively asking questions. She asks, and then through that, she comes to believe. And this lesson this week is about the moral law, our shared understanding of what is right and wrong. And we learn that through asking questions and through experience. If we flip to page 5, the Our Catholic Faith feature, many of the lessons during Lent provide an Old Testament history to provide context for the Gospels. This feature, for example, explains the divide between the Samaritans and other Jews. And where relevant, I just want to point out here that you have kind of an option. The teaching guide will note where it might be beneficial to read the Our Catholic Faith feature before you proclaim the Gospel. In this case, the guide notes to read the Gospel first, which is the standard order of a lesson, and then to move to this feature on page 5, but you could opt to flip them if you wish, if you think your students would benefit from having that gospel background before you proclaim the gospel. A note, the Catholic faith word is Samaritan, and in this case, obviously, it's to reinforce the gospel. If we flip to pages 6 and 7, go on a scavenger hunt for believers. Take time to complete what you can in class. Assign the rest as homework if possible. This will encourage students and their families to visit the parish office or parish website if that's available. If we flip to the final page in the lesson for this week, St. Patrick's Day falls on Tuesday, March 17th. And if permitted in your program, you can celebrate with snacks or other Irish traditions. And I wanted to point out, you may wish to pray the prayer of St. Patrick, which appears on page 56 in your catechism handbook, or encourage the student to pray this prayer with their families. Let us move on to the next lesson, March 22nd, the fourth Sunday of Lent. If we look at the cover, what do I believe in? Give the children time to contemplate their faith in God and the ways that their beliefs are revealed. And of course, the theme of this lesson is we believe in Jesus. The gospel and story this week, it's a little different than our standard lesson format. This week, the story is in a comic or kind of a graphic presentation of the gospel of the man born blind. Make sure to spend some time with this, as it is both the story and the gospel for this lesson, so there's really no rush. Your pacing plans in the teaching guide will indicate about how much time you should spend with this, if you have a 60-minute class, a 90-minute class, or you teach in a school setting over 5 days. Connecting gospel and doctrine, if you flip through to page 4, again, like last week, the connection here is that believers are called to share their faith, as the woman at the well did, shared what she had learned from Jesus. The man born blind also shares his belief. In the WCBT, this lesson is about sin. In Jesus' time, some would have blamed the man's blindness on inherited sins. In this lesson, our students will define sin, understand the difference between mortal and venial sins, and determine what constitutes a sinful act. If we move to page 5, again here, the focus is on the first reading, that Old Testament reading. This week it's about Samuel, who's been tasked by God to choose a new king. The Catholic faith word here is conversion. David was not a perfect king. He sinned, but he repented and experiences conversion. Let's move to the Living the Gospel feature. And these are about our creeds, the creeds of the church. The Nicene and Apostles' creeds are public statements of faith. The students will explore how their faith is growing and changing, and they will identify the things in which they believe. The prayer service, if you flip to page 8, the We Are Children of the Light prayerfully connects light and faith. All right, let's move to this third lesson in the unit, March 29th, the fifth Sunday of Lent. I'm going to encourage you to practice the folds on the cover ahead of your lesson period. And there are little instructions up at the top of the page next to the Pflaum logo in the upper left-hand corner. And it's really just to match, if you look at the top and at the bottom, there are half heart shapes. And you just draw those together and then fold down to, it'll show the change in the activity. Make sure that you don't tape or permanently alter the page, since you will need it. You'll need to be able to open it up and flatten it out again to read the article on pages 2-3. So let's flip to the article on page 2-3 called Remember the Children. The story is about the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and the tile wall, and the children's experience visiting that museum and remembering those children specifically who were killed in the Holocaust. The gospel lesson, the Sunday gospel rather, if you flip to pages 4 and 5, is the story of raising Lazarus from the dead. Plan to spend more time with this longer gospel. If you turn to page 5, the connecting gospel and doctrine for this week, Jesus risks his life to help his friends. And this is a foreshadowing of how he risks his life for the salvation of all people. The WCBT lesson, if you look in the lower right-hand corner of page 5, is a lesson about what does it mean to act for the common good in the interest of all, and what might we risk in the service of all. If we flip to pages 7 and 8, those are the last 2 pages of the lesson. Remind the children that Jesus risks his life to help his friend Lazarus. And while we'll never likely be asked to risk our lives, we can be called daily to risk our friendships, our popularity, and just our general comfort for others. So the Take a Risk to Give Life game on pages 7 and 8 will ask them to consider some different scenarios, low risk and to higher risk activities. Play this game. Sometimes we recommend to pre-cut activities, and you can cut out these cards if your time is tight, but there's also value in leaving this particular page intact so that the children can see that the situations become increasingly risky, uncomfortable, challenging. So, and then give them time to play the games according to the directions on the top of page 7. If you look at the top of page 8, we have the prayer service. Take the time to read this Sunday's responsorial psalm and explain that this type of psalm is called a lament. Read aloud the Catholic faith word and then celebrate the prayer service together. If you turn to page 6 for the Saints prayer service, mostly what I want to point out with this is that these features, if you don't have time in class, can be assigned as homework. You can read them together in class, but they also can be used as a pacing tool. So if you have children who speed through other independent activities more quickly, you can assign them reading the Saints feature and then summarizing what they learn for the rest of the class. So just a suggestion if you have kids who tend to speed ahead through some activities. Let's move on to the next lesson. This is for April 5th, Palm Passion Sunday. Note, this lesson, like the liturgies for Palm Passion Sunday, vary from the regular order with 2 gospel readings, including the procession with palms and the reading of John's Passion account. And let's start with the cover. And you can pace the start of your lesson by assigning the puzzle to those who may arrive early to a parish program. Read aloud the gospel for the procession with palms. The theme for this lesson is we celebrate Jesus' love for us. We actually have 2 Catholic faith words in this lesson, so make sure that the students read and understand both of those. If we flip then to the story, on pages 2 and 3 in this lesson, James Says Goodbye is about the last days of James, a boy who is dying of a terminal illness. Then the story, though, is also about James' brother and his mother remembering James. If we turn to the gospel, if your class meets on multiple days, it suggests that you read Matthew's Passion story. However, you will also read John's Passion account in the Living the Gospel booklet on pages 5 through 8. So you may choose to assign the Sunday Gospel reading as homework. The Connecting Gospel and Doctrine actually appears on page 3 with the story. We walk through Jesus' Paschal mystery, his suffering and death during Holy Week. Jesus suffers and dies for our salvation. And it's important that you spend time with this, as this is a central truth of Christianity, that the children understand the words and the significance of the different events of this week. The WCBT connection, which is also on page 3, is an introduction to the Stations of the Cross. And it also serves to introduce the booklet that appears on pages 5 through 8. Again, if you choose, you may assemble. I would suggest that you prep a sample of the booklet. You also could prep the booklets for the students as well, if you choose to. All right, if we go to page 4, this activity is actually in 2 parts. The Great Christian Service Award at the top and the Holy Thursday prayer service. Have the children, they'll need to complete that top portion first so that they may include the names of the people that they choose to receive the Great Christian Service Award. So they can include that as part of the prayer service, which recounts the Last Supper on Holy Thursday. Finally, that booklet, again, make a sample of the booklet in advance, and you may choose to walk the Stations of the Cross in your parish as you go through the related prayers in the booklet. This physical activity allows the children to engage more of their senses during a longer than usual activity. Also, give volunteers turns to read the prayers at the different stations. All right, let's flip to the next lesson, which is for Easter, second Sunday of Easter, which is also known as the Sunday of Divine Mercy. On the cover, make sure that you check in the materials. I'm certain that it indicates markers and or colored pencils. Give the children time to color the Easter candle. Then either they can roll their lesson and fold onto it into a candle shape so that the candle shows on the outside. If you do have them roll those lessons up, make sure that you have copies of the cover so that they can also read the prayer service at the same time. The theme of this lesson is Jesus rises from the dead. I have a gospel note here. Again, this is an atypical lesson. This is because it covers 2 Sundays. It includes the full gospel text for both Easter Sunday and the second Sunday of Easter. And depending on when your class meets, you may choose to proclaim both gospels at once or save one for each week. I also want to point out that the 2 gospel readings are bridged with the verses John 20, 10 through 18, in which Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. This is noted in the lesson that this is not, that these verses are actually not a part of the Easter Sunday and second Sunday of Easter lessons, but it gives the context between the 2 gospels. The Catholic, or excuse me, just to note that the Catholic faith word is on the cover so that the students understand that we are in Easter both as a day and as a season. If we turn to page 3, the connecting gospel and doctrine, so the students understand that Jesus dies for our salvation and that the Easter gospels are not abstract. They are filled with human emotion of sadness, despair, and then joy and amazement. This is really a gospel, this is really an opportunity for students to kind of put themselves in the story and think about how they would react to these different events that happen in the gospel. In the WCBT lesson, which is noted in the lower right-hand corner of page 3, in just a few short months, you can give the children some context in the where they are in the liturgical year. The children have moved from Jesus' birth, his ministry, and then his passion, death, and resurrection. And at this time, I want them to help them identify where we are in the year by looking at the calendar in their handbooks. And then together you review the mission of Jesus so that they understand how all of these events fit together. Again, we have a booklet in this lesson. It's always good to prep a sample. If you have an aide or volunteer, they can assemble all of the booklets, but most people don't. So work together in a large group to successfully, once they're assembled, work together in a large group to successfully pace the entire booklet. The review crossword that is on page 8 in the booklet, in the assembled booklet, can be assigned as homework. There is a puzzle on page 4, and I would recommend that you assign this as a paired activity, as there are a number of Bible verses to look up, and then the coloring can be assigned as a home activity. All right, so we're deep now into the third Sunday, or into the Easter season. On April 26th, the third Sunday of Easter. Welcome back to the typical venture lesson format. So this will be more familiar to you. This activity on the cover encourages the children to take special notice of the details that they will discover in the Sunday's Gospel, in which Jesus appears to his disciples as they are walking. The theme in this lesson is Jesus is present when we break bread. If you flip to the article on pages 2-3, how the butterfly lady helped the monarchs. This is a good story to prepare for the gospel story of resurrection and a continuation of someone's mission after their death. The teacher in this story left a positive legacy, caring for butterflies and the environment. There are a number of resources here I want to point out for children to start similar programs at their own schools or parishes, or actually even in their own yard or a neighborhood park. And those websites are listed there. If we turn to the Gospel on page 4, Jesus is recognized through the breaking of the bread. We still experience Jesus in this way through the sacrament of the Eucharist. This is the Connecting Gospel and Doctrine and the Catholic Faith Word seek to explain this concept, even to make that connection very clear to the Gospel. And we continue the theme and introduce the idea of transubstantiation, and spend some time with this, as this is a very important thing for the students to understand. If we look on page 5, the Our Catholic Faith feature, How is Jesus Still With Us? A closer analysis of the Sunday Gospel that connects the Gospel story with the Mass. If we flip to pages 7 and 8, so you could tear that page off of the end. Again, you can prep those cards if you want to, but it isn't even necessary, I don't think, to cut them out if you prefer not to take that time, or you think that the cards will be lost. We can, in that activity, we walk through the Sunday Gospel by taking on the thoughts and actions of a character in the Easter story. And this is an excellent review of the Easter Gospels. The Catholic Leaders feature that appears on page 6 is about Bella's birthday boxes. Make sure that the children know about this project. It could make an excellent class service project in these last 2 weeks, or a possible over the summer activity. Think of Vacation Bible School students in this. The project is to create a small box that includes like a cake mix, frostings, and some other small items, maybe balloons, party hats for children whose family are not able, don't have the resources to throw them a birthday party. And Bella submits these or donates these boxes to different organizations. This is a very reproducible project in your parish or school. All right, we're at the second to last lesson, May 3rd, fourth Sunday of Easter, Good Shepherd. On the cover, the students will do a close reading, of Psalm 23. The theme in this lesson is Jesus gives us life to the full. The article, I want to just give a little bit of background on pages 2-3. Note that May is known in the church as Mary's month. I also want to point out that it is Mother's Day next week. Don't forget the mothers. The children will have empathy for the kids in this story who don't see their mother or their father for months, even years, as these are parents who are in serving prison sentences. Make sure to read the sidebar on in the yellow column on page 3 to make sure that the children understand that they too can participate in the programs or contribute to them. I think in this particular case, if I remember correctly, there were students at a parish who collected donations for Stay Connected bags that they could use, that the children in the story could use as a part of their visits to their parents who are in prison. And encourage creative thinking for the students to think of ways that they can contribute their time and talents. And this doesn't just apply to this particular story, like the butterfly story in the previous lesson. There is almost always a way that students can connect to those stories through their own service projects. Just encourage that creative thinking and support them as much as you can in helping themselves. The gospel is that Jesus is our shepherd. He knows us by name and loves us. The gospel, connecting gospel and doctrine at the bottom of page 4 continues this message that Jesus is our protective shepherd as well, and the pathway to salvation. The WCBT, we noted at the beginning that this is Mary's month. So it's an overview of the prayers of Mary in the church. If we go to, and we continue that in the Our Catholic Faith feature on page 5, the church honors Mary, our mother. Note, if your parish does not have art or a statuary of Mary, you may wish in advance to look up and print images from the internet prior to class, or bring in a tablet and have different examples of art available. If you flip to the last 2 pages in the lesson, page 7, 8, we are called to be like Jesus. All Christians are called to serve. This call is referred to as our vocation. Suggest having groups, the children work in partners and then gather into a large group. And it's a way for children who might not speak up in a large group to be able to have their voice heard if they're just working with a partner. Again, the Catholic faith word is vocation. And we close this lesson with a prayer service on page 6. And also a continuation, remind the children that simply because Lent is over, we've moved into Easter. We often, this is my own personal recollection of my Lenten commitments as a child. If I gave up something, I'm like, phew, I got to Easter and now I get to have candy, or now I get to have, watch the TV on weeknights or whatever. Remind the children that their Lenten commitments are bringing them closer to God. So the idea of continuing these commitments past the Lent season is very appropriate. And if they weren't terribly successful with their Lenten commitments, this is a time for them to think of things that they would like to try again. So there's an activity at the bottom of page 6 that will help them do that. All right, we're going to move to the last lesson for the 5th Sunday of Easter, May 10th. Again, so I don't forget at the end, remember that you do have those late close lessons available at gospelweeklies.com/venture or in the Venture activity book. But let's turn to the cover of the May 10th lesson for the 5th Sunday of Easter. We belong to God and to one another. And this cover attempts to help the children understand their connectedness as people on earth and as Christians, and help them understand that what they do affects others. We emphasize Catholic social teaching that we are responsible for each other. The story or play, Why is the Sky So Far Away, based on a folk tale. This is a story about interdependence. It continues that theme of working for the common good that the children learned earlier in this unit. It also connects to the Sunday Gospel, that God has prepared an eternal home for all of us. Gospel, the theme is Jesus reveals his Father. That's on page 4. And the connecting gospel and doctrine. Before Jesus returns to his Father in heaven, he assures his friends that there will be a place for them and they will know the way to reach him. The WCBT on page 4 is an introduction to the gifts of the Spirit. And this is a way that that we connect. We don't, obviously the lessons don't go through into Pentecost, but we like, as with this last lesson, for it to be kind of a sending forth. And so we try to at least introduce some of the ideas of the Pentecost message and the sending out. Let's see, let's move to the Our Catholic Faith feature on page 5, Metaphors in the Bible. It's important that the children really understand the language of the church and the language of the Bible so that they feel part of it. This Bible Look Up activity will familiarize the children with, well, both some of the things that came out of the Second Vatican Council, but also just kind of a better working knowledge of what we refer to when we say the church. Not a church building, but all the people of God in the worldwide church. And this will help increase their familiarity with Catholic vocabulary. The Living the Gospel feature is meant, if we turn to pages 6, 7, it is meant to help the children to find God in creation, through Jesus, and in the church. The prayer service on page 8, we protect God's creation. The children will take a pledge to care for creation, which is one, and to take the opportunity to introduce ways that they can care for the earth, its people and its creatures during the summer. And this is a good send-off for a final lesson. And that concludes our overview of Unit 4 for Venture. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. And if you have any questions, again, please contact us at editor@pflaum.com. If you have suggestions for stories, something you've done in your parish or school that you think would be a great story for the program, you can send it also to editor@pflaum.com. And now, Erica will go over the bilingual portion of Venture.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica de Urquidi, the bilingual editor for Pflaum. Before we go into the bilingual lessons, there are a few things that I want to remind you about the resources that we have in Spanish in our website. If you visit gospelweeklies.com and you click on the browse button at the top, you can find a bilingual resources button that you can click and access everything that we have in Spanish for you. We have the teaching guides in Spanish here. We have the weekly videos for every lesson, Gospel at Home for families. We have the reviews, assessments, seasonal activities, just for you to download and use for your lessons. The teaching guide, as I mentioned, we have that in Spanish for Venture, for every level as well. You can download them here on our website, or you can ask for them if you want to have them in print. You just contact your sales rep and just let them know that you would like to have a printed copy, and we will send the teaching guide in Spanish to you. On the guides, we have the scope and sequence for the whole year in the back. It's completely in Spanish. And now going to the bilingual lessons for Venture, there are a few things that I want to point out for Unit 4. First of all, March 15th, the third Sunday of Lent, there is a song that we suggest on the teaching guide for the opening and closing prayers. I am also suggesting a song in Spanish if you want to use that one. I include the lyrics for that song in our website at gospelweeklies.com/lesson updates. And that is noted on the Spanish teaching guide. So you're going to find that information there. Same for the lesson on April 5th, Palm Sunday. Okay, what happened here? Okay, there we go. We're also suggesting a song in Spanish for the opening prayer. And I'm on the teaching guide, I tell you where to find the lyrics in Spanish for that song. And finally, the last lesson for May 10th, fifth Sunday of Easter. On page 8 of this lesson, the English lesson features the song For the Beauty of Earth. In Spanish, we included a popular song called Alabado sea Señor. That goes very well with the lesson, and it's widely popular and known. I am including a link where you can find the lyrics and the music to this song at gospelweeklies.com. If you go to lesson updates, you'll find it there. Also, I noted it in the teaching guide, so it's easier for you to find. And that's all I have for Venture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica, and thanks again to Nicole. And again, please feel free to contact us at editor@pflaum.com. Last note is don't forget to use your teaching guides. We do hear that people don't either know about the guides or don't refer to them because of lack of time or don't necessarily know how they could work and help you teach the lesson. So please take a look at them. If you don't have one, please ask your religion director or a religion coordinator in school for the guide. It would be very helpful, and I think it's really difficult to teach lessons without them. Thank you so much, and blessings to you, and have a great day. Thank you.